In the beginning, before the earth was scarred by sin and flooded by judgment, there were whispers of a time when heaven touched earth in rebellion. A time when angels abandoned their divine station and mingled with the daughters of men. It was a time of unimaginable corruption, when violence filled the earth and giants walked among men. This is the story few dare to tell, a story ripped from ancient scrolls hidden away for centuries, a story from the Book of Giants. It is a tale so haunting that many sought to erase it, yet it continues to resurface, warning us of a coming judgment. Today, we dive into the secrets of the Book of Giants, a companion text to the Book of Enoch and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and a glimpse into the world that existed before Noah's Ark. The Book of Giants is not a complete book as we know it. Instead, it survives in fragments, carefully preserved among the Dead Sea Scrolls. These scrolls were discovered in the caves of Qumran in the mid-20th century, a miraculous find that would change the course of biblical archaeology forever. Among them were cryptic passages describing a world of chaos, fallen angels who descended upon Mount Hermon, a generation of hybrid beings born of their union with human women, and the violent reign of giants that followed. While the Book of Enoch gives us a broad narrative of these events, the Book of Giants zooms in, revealing intimate details about these monstrous beings, their dreams, their fears, and their eventual destruction at the hands of God. This story is not simply ancient myth. It is a chilling historical record that explains why God had to cleanse the world with a flood. The giants were not merely tall men. They were a living abomination, the unholy offspring of heavenly beings and mortal flesh. Known as the Nephilim, they were mighty, terrifying, and ravenous. They consumed everything, even turning to cannibalism, and filled the earth with bloodshed. Humanity cried out, and heaven responded. But before judgment fell, something happened. The giants themselves began to fear their fate. The Book of Giants gives us a glimpse into their minds through haunting dreams and visions. One of the most well-preserved passages tells us that the giant named Ohia had a terrifying dream. He saw a massive tablet descend from heaven, and on it was written their doom. In his dream, the tablet was submerged in water and destroyed, symbolizing the coming flood that would wipe out their race. Another giant, Mawe, also had visions of destruction, and in desperation, he flew to heaven seeking answers. This detail is fascinating because it shows that these creatures, though monstrous, were deeply aware of their rebellion and impending punishment. They were not ignorant of God. They were terrified of him. In their fear, the giants turned to Enoch, the righteous scribe who walked with God and was taken to heaven without tasting death. They begged him to intercede with the Creator on their behalf. Imagine that scene, a towering race of hybrid warriors kneeling, pleading for mercy from a man of God. Knowing their time was running out, Enoch became their last hope. According to the Book of Giants, Enoch was given a message from God and returned to them with a chilling verdict. Their judgment was sealed. The angels who had descended would be bound in chains and cast into darkness, and their offspring, the giants, would perish in the great flood. The emotional weight of this story is profound. These beings were not mere monsters. They were souls born of rebellion, creatures who could see their end approaching but could do nothing to stop it. The Book of Giants shows us that even the mightiest enemies of God cannot escape his justice. It reveals the heartbreaking consequences of sin, the price of disobedience, and the wrath of a holy God who will not tolerate corruption forever. The fragments of this book come from the Aramaic language, and scholars believe it was widely read among early Jewish communities. It was never included in the canon of Scripture, but its story aligns closely with Genesis 6, the Book of Enoch, and passages in the New Testament that reference fallen angels and spiritual warfare. The early church fathers were well aware of these texts. Some, like Tertullian, considered the Book of Enoch and its companion writings as inspired, while others were cautious, fearing their contents might be too mysterious or dangerous for widespread teaching. Yet, even today, the Book of Giants speaks powerfully, connecting us that many Christians have wondered about for centuries. Why does Genesis 6 speak of the sons of God taking wives from among the daughters of men? Who were the Nephilim? Why was the flood necessary? The Book of Giants offers answers. It tells us that these fallen angels, known as Watchers, did not simply fall from grace but actively conspired against God's design. They descended with knowledge meant for heaven and corrupted humanity with it. They taught forbidden arts, from weapon making to sorcery, and turned God's creation upside down. The result was a world so wicked that only a complete cleansing could save it. Imagine living in those days. The earth was not as we know it now. It was a place of unimaginable terror. Enormous creatures roamed the land, ruling over humans with violence and fear. Cities were built under their shadow, and mankind lived as prey. The cries of humanity reached heaven, and the Creator responded with a plan of salvation through Noah, a righteous man chosen to preserve humanity and creation. The Book of Giants fills in this backdrop, making Noah's mission even more heroic and God's justice even more understandable. One of the most cinematic moments in the Book of Giants is the reaction of these hybrids when they realize their doom. Their dreams haunted them, and their pleas to Enoch were filled with desperation. They knew their rebellion had no future. They saw visions of heaven's armies preparing for war. They felt the earth trembling beneath them as divine judgment approached. The flood was not just water. It was the hand of God sweeping across the earth to cleanse it of evil. This makes the flood narrative not just a children's story about animals on an ark, but a cosmic act of warfare between God and the forces of darkness. The emotional gravity deepens when we realize that these fallen angels were once glorious beings who stood before the throne of God. Their rebellion was not born of ignorance, but of pride. They saw God's glory, yet they chose to corrupt His creation. The Book of Giants forces us to confront this reality. Sin is not merely a mistake. It is rebellion against a holy God. This is why judgment was so severe. And this is why Jesus' sacrifice is so powerful. The same God who destroyed a world of wickedness also made a way for salvation. This book also connects deeply with prophecy about the end times. Jesus himself said in Matthew 24 that as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at his coming. The days of Noah were filled with supernatural corruption, angelic rebellion, and global deception. The Book of Giants gives us a clear picture of that era, warning us of a future that might reflect its darkness. Could it be that we are already living in a time that mirrors the days of Noah? A time of technological marvels, genetic manipulation, and moral decay? The ancient text serves as both a historical document and a prophetic mirror, reflecting our own age. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls brought this story back into the light. For centuries, the Book of Giants was hidden, almost lost to history. Why? Perhaps because it reveals too much. It pulls back the curtain on spiritual warfare, showing us that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. It reminds us that the world we see is only part of the picture. There are forces of good and evil moving behind the scenes, shaping the destiny of nations. Reading this book is like stepping into a forgotten chapter of human history. We see the Watchers not as vague symbols, but as real beings whose choices had devastating consequences. We see giants not as mythical creatures, but as living proof of rebellion. We see Enoch not just as a mysterious man who disappeared, but as a prophet who stood between heaven and earth, delivering God's message of judgment. This is why the Book of Giants is so important. It fills in the gaps and makes Scripture come alive in ways that shake us to our core. But beyond the fear and fascination, this story carries a message of hope. God is always in control. No matter how dark the world becomes, no matter how powerful the forces of evil seem, God's justice will prevail. The flood was not only a judgment, but a new beginning. Humanity was given a second chance through Noah, and through Jesus Christ, we are offered eternal redemption. The Book of Giants, though terrifying, points us back to the mercy of God, who intervenes to save His creation from destruction. As we study this ancient text, we must remember that its purpose is not to glorify evil, but to expose it. It is a warning to us. Just as the giants knew their time was short, so too does Satan know that his time is limited. The rebellion that began in the days of Noah continues today, but so does God's plan of salvation. The same God who judged the ancient world will judge the world again, and this time, it will not be with water, but with fire. The Book of Giants is not just a historical curiosity, it is a prophetic call. It reminds us to stay vigilant, to be faithful, and to seek righteousness. It challenges us to see the Bible not as a collection of fairy tales, but as a living testimony of God's dealings with mankind. The giants may be gone, but their story lives on, warning us of the cost of sin and the power of God's judgment. In conclusion, the Book of Giants is one of the most haunting and fascinating texts ever discovered. It pulls us into a time when the veil between heaven and earth was thin, when angels walked among men, and when evil seemed unstoppable. Yet, even in that darkness, God's light prevailed. He raised up Noah, He preserved humanity, and He prepared the way for the coming of Jesus Christ, the ultimate giant slayer, who crushed the head of the serpent and offered salvation to all who believe. This is more than a story. It is a wake-up call. The days of Noah are not just history, they are prophecy. The rebellion of the Watchers and the giants is a shadow of the spiritual battle raging today. But just as God was victorious then, He will be victorious again. The Book of Giants is not a book of despair, but a book of warning and hope. It reminds us that no power of darkness can overcome the Creator, and no corruption is beyond His cleansing hand.